Here's how your introduction could go. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I had spent months planning, dreaming, and imagining this moment, walking down the aisle, looking into the eyes of the man I loved, and saying, I do. But instead, I found myself standing in the doorway of a hotel suite, my heart pounding, my stomach in knots, staring at a scene that shattered my entire world. Let me take you back a bit. My name is Emily, and for the past 5 years, I had been in what I thought was a perfect relationship with my fiancé, Jake. We met in college, survived long distance, and built a life together. He was charming, supportive, and everything I ever wanted. At least, that's what I believed. And then there was my best friend, Sarah. We had been inseparable since childhood, always there for each other through every heartbreak, every late-night cry session, and every big milestone. She was more than a friend. She was family. The morning of my wedding, I woke up feeling anxious, but I chalked it up to normal pre-wedding jitters. My bridesmaids were buzzing around, getting ready, and my mom kept reminding me to breathe. But something felt off. Jake had been acting strange for weeks, distant, distracted, but when I asked him about it, he just blamed work stress. And Sarah? Well, she had been avoiding me more than usual. I figured she was just overwhelmed with maid of honor duties. I had no idea what was really happening. Then, about an hour before the ceremony, I realized I had left my vows in Jake's suite. My hands were already shaking as I took the elevator up to his room. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe it was something deeper, some unspoken fear I had buried. I knocked on the door, expecting one of his groomsmen to answer, but no one did. The door wasn't locked, so I pushed it open. And that's when I saw them, Jake, Sarah, together, in a way that no bride should ever have to witness. My breath caught in my throat. My ears started ringing. I wanted to scream, to run, to wake up from what had to be a nightmare. But it was real. The two people I trusted most had betrayed me in the worst possible way. On my wedding day, they didn't even notice me at first. When they finally realized I was standing there, Sarah's face turned pale, and Jake just froze, his mouth opening like he wanted to explain. But there was nothing to say, nothing that could ever fix this. I don't even remember how I got out of that room. My legs moved before my brain could catch up. All I knew was that I couldn't go through with this wedding. I couldn't stand in front of my friends and family and pretend everything was okay. But what was I supposed to do? Call off the wedding with guests already seated? Confront them in front of everyone? Or disappear before anyone could notice? And that's when it hit me. I had a choice to make. I stood there in the hallway, my heart racing, my hands shaking. Everything felt unreal, like I had stepped into a terrible dream that I couldn't wake up from. My mind was spinning, trying to process what I had just seen. The love of my life, the man I was supposed to marry in less than an hour, had betrayed me, and not just with anyone, with my best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone else. I could still hear muffled voices behind the door, but I didn't want to stay long enough to hear whatever excuse they might try to come up with. I turned and walked as fast as I could down the hallway, my wedding dress dragging behind me. I didn't even care if anyone saw me. I just needed to get away before I completely broke down. As I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was my mom, probably wondering where I was. My bridesmaids were likely looking for me, too. The guests were already seated, waiting for the ceremony to begin. But how was I supposed to face them? How was I supposed to explain what had just happened? Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to keep moving. I stepped outside the hotel, the cool air hitting my face like a slap. My car was parked just a few feet away. For a brief second, I thought about just getting in and driving off, leaving everything behind. No explanations, no confrontation, just disappearing. But was that really the right thing to do? A part of me wanted to storm back inside and scream at them in front of everyone. I wanted the world to know what they had done, to make them feel the humiliation and pain I was feeling. But another part of me just felt exhausted, drained of all emotion. I had spent so much time loving Jake, trusting Sarah, building my future with people who clearly never valued me the same way. I looked down at my wedding dress, the one I had spent months picking out. It was supposed to be a symbol of a new beginning, of happiness. But now it felt like a cruel joke, my hands clenched into fists. What was I supposed to do now? Cancel the wedding? Walk down the aisle and pretend nothing happened? Or take back control of my own story? I didn't have the answer yet, but one thing was clear. This wasn't going to end the way they expected. I stood there, gripping the fabric of my dress, my breath shaky and uneven. Every part of me wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers. But at the same time, what was the point? The damage was already done. No explanation could change what I had seen. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my mom. It was Jake. I stared at his name on the screen, my thumb hovering over the decline button. What could he possibly say to me? That it was a mistake? That it didn't mean anything? That he still wanted to marry me? The thought made my stomach turn. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I turned off my phone and let the silence settle in. Inside the hotel, I could hear the muffled sound of wedding guests chatting, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding just a few floors above them. Somewhere in that crowd were people who had traveled miles to celebrate us, people who believed in the love story I had built in my head. My parents, my family, my friends. They were all waiting for me. And then there was Sarah's family. Did they know? Had they suspected something I had been too blind to see? My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Had everyone been lying to me? Were there signs I had missed? I thought back to the little things, the late-night texts, the stolen glances, the way Sarah always seemed just a little too invested in my relationship with Jake. Had I ignored my instincts? Had I convinced myself that my best friend would never betray me? The pain in my chest grew sharper. I had trusted them both with everything. And now I was left standing here, alone, with no idea what to do next. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but nothing could stop the storm brewing inside me. My hands trembled, my pulse raced, and my entire body felt like it was running on pure adrenaline. I could feel the weight of my wedding dress pressing down on me, suffocating, like a cruel reminder of the life I had been seconds away from committing to. A life that had just crumbled before my eyes. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement near the hotel entrance. Jake. He had come looking for me. His tie was loose, his hair slightly messy, like he had rushed out of the room without thinking. When our eyes met, I saw something in his face: panic, guilt, desperation. He started toward me, but I took a step back. "Emily, please, let me explain," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, my nails digging into my palms. "Explain what, Jake?" My voice wavered between heartbreak and fury. "Explain how you betrayed me, how you lied to me, how you threw away everything we had?" He opened his mouth, but before he could answer, I heard another voice, a voice I knew all too well. "Emily." I turned, and there she was, Sarah, still in her maid of honor dress, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. She looked like she wanted to run but knew she had nowhere to go. Seeing her standing there next to Jake was too much. It made everything feel real. "Don't," I warned, my voice sharp. "Don't even say my name." She swallowed hard, her hands twisting together. I never meant for this to happen, she started. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound unfamiliar even to my own ears. You never meant for this to happen? I repeated. You knew exactly what you were doing. Both of you did. Jake reached for my hand, but I pulled away as if his touch would burn me. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. I could feel every set of eyes on us. Wedding guests beginning to trickle out of the venue, whispers spreading like wildfire. This was it, the moment everything would explode. A hush fell over the entrance of the hotel as more guests began to step outside, their confused murmurs filling the space between us. Jake and Sarah stood frozen, caught like thieves who had finally been exposed. My heart pounded so loudly in my ears that I could barely hear anything else. But just as I was about to walk away, determined to leave them in the mess they created, a voice rang out from the crowd. Wait, you knew? I turned sharply, my breath catching. It was Mark, Jake's best man and one of his oldest friends. His expression twisted in disbelief, his gaze shifting between Jake and Sarah like he was piecing something together for the first time. Jake stiffened. Mark, don't. But Mark took a step closer, shaking his head. Number, you told me last night that you were stressed about the wedding, that you weren't sure if you were making the right choice. But you knew? His voice rose, anger flashing in his eyes. How long has this been going on? A heavy silence followed. Jake wouldn't look at him. Sarah turned away. And that's when it hit me. Mark didn't know. If Mark had no idea, then maybe Jake's other friends didn't either. Maybe this wasn't just some last-minute mistake. Maybe this had been planned. I felt my stomach turn as a horrifying thought crossed my mind. Had they been planning to go through with the wedding anyway? Were they really going to stand up there, say their vows, smile for pictures, while carrying this disgusting secret? Sarah let out a shaky breath. Emily, please. I snapped my gaze back to her. How long? My voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the air like a knife. She hesitated for just a second too long, and that's when I knew. It hadn't just been a mistake. It hadn't just been a moment of weakness. This wasn't new. This had been going on for a long time. Everything inside me went still. The way Sarah looked at me, guilty, ashamed, but not surprised, told me everything I needed to know. This hadn't just been a mistake. This had been a betrayal that stretched beyond a single moment. It was something planned, something they thought they could hide forever. My fingers curled into fists as I took a step closer, my voice ice cold. How long? Jake exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face like he was trying to find the right words. But there were no right words. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sarah spoke. A year. A sharp breath escaped me, like I had been punched in the stomach. A whole year? While I was planning a wedding, picking out flowers, dreaming about a future, they were sneaking around behind my back. My best friend, the man I was supposed to marry. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mark looked like he might actually hit Jake, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might snap. My mother had made her way to the front, her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with shock. The weight of everyone's stares settled over Jake and Sarah, trapping them in the mess they had created. And then, just when I thought nothing else could shock me, Mark spoke again. I can't believe you did this, he said, his voice low. To her and to me. I blinked. What? I turned to him, my heart pounding all over again. What are you talking about? Mark swallowed hard. He wouldn't look at me, wouldn't look at Jake. Because he wasn't just Jake's best friend. He was Sarah's boyfriend. The world around me seemed to freeze. My mind struggled to process what Mark had just said. Sarah's boyfriend? I turned to her, searching for any sign that this was some kind of misunderstanding, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Is that true? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah didn't answer, but the way Jake flinched, the way Mark clenched his fists, it told me everything. Sarah hadn't just betrayed me, she had betrayed him too. Mark let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. I trusted you, he said, his voice filled with quiet disbelief. I stood up for you, and the whole time you were sneaking around with him? Sarah opened her mouth, maybe to explain, maybe to lie, but I didn't care anymore. I was done trying to make sense of it, done giving them any more of my energy. I let out a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything lift just a little. I turned to Mark. We both deserved better. He nodded, his jaw still tight, but there was something in his eyes, an understanding. We had both been blindsided, both played by the people we trusted most. And yet, at this moment, I didn't feel as alone as I had minutes ago. I looked at Jake one last time. There was no regret in his eyes, only shame that he had been caught. Sarah looked like she wanted to cry, but I wasn't going to comfort her. Not this time. Without another word, I turned and walked away. The wedding was over, but my life, it was just beginning.